Gilda Perez-Alvarado is the CEO of Orient Express and the Group Chief Strategy Officer at Accor. She's a member of the Board of Trustees at Cornell University and previously was the Global CEO of JLL's Hotels and Hospitality Group. Gilda, thanks for joining us.
Thank you for having me.
So maybe to kick us off, you were just named CEO of Accor's luxury brand, Orient Express. Tell us a little bit more about this new role.
Listen, it's definitely one of the most exciting roles I've ever had in my life. This is a very special brand with a tremendous amount of legacy, history, brand equity. The fact that we're making a very significant investment in terms of taking its heritage and making it even more relevant today. And I've been, given the honor of leading that with the team here at Accor. It's a dream for me. So I'm very, very excited to work with the team and to take the brand forward.
It's a really exciting brand, and I feel the history of train travel, of voyages, of that is so storied, and it's included in so many movies and things like that. And I was going through the website, and I think that your teams do a good job of telling that story. It's got to be really interesting to kind of step into that environment, as you say, with so much brand equity and legacy. How do you think about stewarding, that history and moving it forward to what it can become?
Listen, we're taking it very seriously. So we do have brand historians, creative directors, an amazing design team reviewing all the archives. I mean, this is something that is of national and I would say European interest, working with our partners, brands that were present inside the Orient Express over 100 years ago. So we're being very meticulous about it. What you've seen, I don't think it's a reflection of what the brand is going to be. Let's just say, we're at day one, and so honestly, the opportunities are endless, and this is a jewel that we have. This is treasure.
I'm really excited to see what you and your teams build with that. What is also interesting and exciting is, just this year you were named and you began this new role in October of 2023 of Group Chief Strategy Officer at Accor. That is a role that you're going to retain even as you are CEO of Orient Express. And Accor, of course, has so many brands, such an incredible company. Tell us a little bit about why you took that job.
Oh, I don't know. I think that the answer I gave a friend of mine is why not? Honestly, Accor is one of the most exciting companies. I would say the most exciting company in hospitality right now. It's got amazing leadership with Sebastian Bazin. Him and I, we've known each other for a long time. We've been good friends. And I like to say the first time I met him, I said to myself, one day I'm going to do something. We're going to work together and I'm going to learn from him. And I tell you what I've discovered since I set foot inside this organization, it's been wonderful. There's an amazing group of people, a can-do attitude. I like to speak in past conversations about me considering myself to be a global citizen. I tell you, I've met my tribe. They're all global citizens here, which is really great. Everybody brings a level of expertise that I've never seen before. And so it's exciting. And if you look back at what Accor has done, since inception, but especially within the last 10 years, when Sebastian is taking the realm of the operation, taking the helm of the operations, it's incredible. No other company has grown the way Sebastian has grown Accor. And so that attitude of entrepreneurship with quite a bit of legacy, being in Paris, having a very fresh approach to life, to business, to corporate social responsibility, etc. For me, it's been amazing. So again, I go back to the beginning of the answer. Why not? I'd be silly not to do it in my lifetime.
One of the things that really stood out to me when I was listening to Sebastian on some CEO panels at NYU Investment Conference and elsewhere, he always had a very different approach. And so it could be partially some of his approach, but I imagine there's a lot of the culture there that is driving some of the way that Accor operates. I'm curious, what are some of the things that you've observed, just a few months into this role now as you've been talking to people, I imagine across the company, around the world, that if you think about your prior role as global CEO of JLL, you saw so much of the industry, right? Now you are
Mhm.
in this collection of brands. What stands out to you as different?
Um, actually, it's not too there's many things that are not dissimilar. So when I was running the hospitality team at JLL, we were a group of about 400 individuals from around the world, all from different backgrounds. The My immediate team was multicultural, multilingual. So that global aspect of it, it's here but augmented at Accor. I love traveling. I love meeting with different people, different backgrounds, learning about their cultures, seeing different things, different ways of doing things. So that's how I learn. And Accor has that every single day so far. And I know I'm new, so maybe there's some of that. Every day is completely different. I'm learning something else. There's a lot of perspective here in the team. And as I mentioned to you, what's really interesting? There's a very big component of the team that is legacy who've been here for a very long time. There's also a very big component of the team that is fairly new, let's say, maybe less than 2 years since they've been here. So it's a really nice balance of legacy with, let's say, new know-how, and everybody's an expert in their field. There's not a lot of duplicate. There's no duplication of roles. Everybody's bringing in what they're best in class at. And for me, it's been fascinating, one, to see how welcoming everybody's been. I mean, it really is a hospitality company. Everybody's been more than wonderful. And everybody knows their craft better than anybody else who have met before. So it's bringing that team together, having that same vision, even for somebody who's been in the role for 2 months. That's testament to the strong leadership that we have at the company.
That's great. I would love to hear you talk a little bit about how you've spent those last couple of months, because you're running strategy now for this really big, influential company. How do you decide what those first few months look like in order to set yourself up for success?
Listen, I got a lot of advice before I joined, from a lot of friends in the industry. Several of them you would consider competitors. But the beauty about our gen, and the industry, it's a very, very open, very friendly, very helpful industry. So I got amazing advice. And, the best piece of advice that I got was go learn, listen, see, experience. And that's what I've been doing for, the last 2 months. I've been obviously participating and adding value as much as I could. But I also want to make sure that I come here with an unbiased approach. I'm listening. I'm getting the context behind, I'm getting the why. Why do we do things this way? Why is this our approach? What's the context behind it? And, when you're going up an organization, even at JLL or anywhere for that matter, people are always very critical of, oh, I would do things this way, or why was this decision taken, etc. And you don't have the full context. You don't have that vantage point. And so that's what I've tried to quote perfect as much as I've could for the last 8+ weeks. Just observe, learn, and get the context. I think the other bit that for me was very exciting. I couldn't have made a bigger change in my career. Yes, I stayed within the same industry. I stayed in hospitality, but it's a different side of hospitality. It's a different company. It's a different organizational culture. It's a different country. It's a different language, right? So everything is new. It would be a mistake for me to get in here day one and start undoing or doing without understanding the why we do things.
Across all of those conversations, have there been some things that have stood out to you or surprised you?
One, I knew the company was very global, but my God, it's super global. It's hyper global. I've never
What do
been
you
in a
mean by
more
that?
global, I've never been in a more global company than this one, and this has been amazing. I geek out on anything and everything: travel, global politics. This has it all, which is really great. So I've met people from all sides of all corners of Earth, which has been really great. Our reach as it relates to, I don't know, our local connections across many countries in the world, that is, that's great. Relationships that we have with different embassies, that's also really great. And so that level of expertise from a geopolitical, macroeconomic, social perspective that is here in this company, I think it's a wealth of knowledge. And so I've really, really enjoyed learning from that side of the business, learning from the people in that side of the business.
I would love to hear your perspective on building strategic competitive advantage, because I often hear this talked about on a brand level, or people
Hmm.
have a concept that they're trying to establish. And Accor is unique because it has such a collection of brands, it even has a collection that are collections of brands. There's so
I
many different
know.
concepts that you're building. I'm curious, leading global strategy for Accor, are there a couple core competencies that you feel the company does really well that you want to see it double down on, that you think are going to be important as being a collection of brands?
Absolutely. I think the main one is we have been extremely respectful of those founder-led brands. So if you look at the brands that the group has acquired or partnered with over the last decade, if there's a founder, that founder has remained in place. That DNA, the brand architecture has stayed intact. And so I really love that. Getting to know, a lot of those personalities, hearing what their initial vision was when they were entrepreneurs, either launching that concept or that brand, and how they've partnered with Accor to bring through the machine. That has been great. I would say that's probably the one of the main core competencies that I would like to see even more of. The other one is, we're just because you're in hospitality doesn't mean that you have to just focus on the hotel or the guest room experience. We do have an incredible team of food and beverage and entertainment experts. We do, massive catering and hospitality work with big events: World Cup recently in Qatar, the Olympic Games here in Paris next year. So that level of expertise, that is incredible. From a food and beverage experiential perspective, to the nth degree, what the Paris Society team have done, it's hats down, hats off, hands down. What they've done is just extraordinary. We just recently opened, Paris Society just recently reopened Maxime's. Tremendous amount of history, lots of stories to tell. The way the place was curated, how the experience has been curated, the attention to detail. Wow. In terms of craftsmanship, I guess that's what you get when you come to Europe. That's what you get when you come to Paris. It is truly exquisite. So yes, that is also a very big competitive advantage. I could go on and on. The team who leads sustainability here, this is, they are definitely walking the walk. It's not some PR campaign, greenwashing. I'm not suggesting everybody else is doing that, but I'm saying this is for us incredibly important. The level of knowledge that exists in terms of regulatory compliance from a European Commission perspective, one, or just global, and just doing good, and making sure that that is part of the DNA. We have, the individual who leads that department. She's absolutely extraordinary and expert in her field. And so for me, again, it's refreshing to hear her speak. It's like I'm getting a PhD level lecture every time. So it's, again, that level of um, IQ, EQ, all that learning that I've been doing for the last several weeks. It's been incredible. It's been great.
Well, this is one of the advantages of having the global presence that you have, because I think if you speak about something like sustainability, some countries, it seems, are a little further down the path in adopting some of these practices, or there's just talented individuals around the world. So when you have that global perspective, you can pull from the best of places or thought leaders and incorporate them into the business. But I do want to underscore what you mentioned about founder-led brands, because in talking to some of the leadership team at Ennismore, talking with people on the ground at some of the properties among that collection of brands, and then actually talking to founder-led brands or brands that used to be founder-led and that have become part of other companies, has kind of served as a bad example. But you sort of see the power of that, and I think that is, if you think across the collection of Ennismore brands, how those have thrived, I think is a
Yeah.
big piece of that is being founder-led, which is exciting to see. But I guess to follow up on one point you made about expanding the scope of hospitality, you've been named CEO of Orient Express, which has this legacy of train travel. Do you feel there are growth opportunities in taking the practices of hospitality and then expressing it through some of the new ways that you mentioned, whether it is train travel or using space in different ways? Is that a big growth area for hospitality moving forward?
Oh, massive. And we were doing a lot. I was doing a lot of work when I was at JLL on this subject. We were calling it the hotelization of real estate. But really the application is it's immense. It's hospitality, it's service, is optimizing how we use space, to your point, right? So here, just from the Ennismore umbrella, there's the members club, there's the food and beverage angle, there's the co-working space. With Paris Society, again, it's the entertainment space. There's a residential division for branded residential, which you saw. It's had its amazing boom fuel during, I guess as a result of the pandemic, or since the pandemic, it's grown at extraordinary levels. So there's so much that all of us can do. And I would say it's not just hotel companies, but it's anything and everything that has to do with living, right? Anything that has a bed in it, there's an application there. Even, by the way, people are rethinking offices too. How do we get people back to the office? How do we make office, you know, how do we, adapt it for the different needs that you have? Collaboration at certain times of the day, you need deep thinking space. The other times of the day, you need to be inspired. I was listening to a podcast. This was a while ago, and the individual was talking about the fact that maybe there aren't the institutions that used to exist maybe 50 years ago. The institution now, whatever it may be a religious type of institution, or family community, whatever it is. But for a lot of people, that institution becomes the office, is where they work, right? There's um, that's where you go and you share with your community. That's where you go and learn. That's where you go and you get inspired. There's a certain set of values that the company or where you're working or you're collaborating is trying to impart on you. So the office has now become very important space. And so how you curate that space to make people want to come to the office, want to share that knowledge, be able to grow and deliver on that network intelligence that you're trying to get from a team. That's very important. And those office buildings are taking pages out of the hotel's hospitality playbook as well. So there's, definitely we could have an hours long chat on this subject alone. It really is fascinating.
I'd like to talk a little bit more about real estate, because I feel many participants in the hospitality industry actually don't know that much about real estate. And I want people to understand the built environment and the role of it in providing hospitality. It's a big economic driver, it influences a lot.
Mhm.
Your grandmother owned a hotel, if I understand it correctly. And then you built this career in real estate on so many different levels up to leading JLL as global CEO. My question for you is, what would you like industry participants to know about real estate or the built environment if they maybe have had no exposure to it? Why does some knowledge of real estate matter as a hospitality provider?
Well, without real estate, it doesn't work. You know what I mean? So, my gosh, where do we start? There's so many stakeholders. Just to take a step back, there's so many stakeholders, all critical, none more important than the other, by the way, in hospitality. So there's obviously your employees, your guests, the owner of the building, the management of the hotel, but really super important, the community where you operate, right? So you have to have an understanding of real estate because, again, this is where you're going to be planting your flag. You cannot move your location, okay? The best hotels are curated for every single guest. By the way, that doesn't mean just the guest that is paying for the hotel room for that one evening or whatever the length of stay is, but also the community. Are they going to go and are they going to become patrons of your hotel? Are they going to dine in the hotel? Are they going to use it maybe for a meeting? Maybe they want to stay there. Maybe they want to celebrate something there. So you have to know about real estate to know where to open. By the way, real estate is extremely important. About 40% of all carbon emissions come from the built environment. So you got to be sensitive to that. But there are so many, honestly, there's so many applications. From the community bit for me is something I feel very passionate about. A proper building or a proper collection of buildings can make or break a neighborhood. Okay, it can. So, there's so many city centers that, that are dilapidated right now. And it's very sad. It has a massive economic implication to the people who live there or work there or commute to that city center. The best development that I've seen right now, so world class. We're working on at JLL and here at Accor, we're working on several projects in the Middle East. But you take what's going on in Saudi Arabia at the moment, which is experiencing a very big development boom, of course. It's not just putting buildings one right next to each other and saying, you know what, that's the community. It's placemaking. So you also need to take that into consideration when you're working with real estate. What are the uses around it? How are you going to curate the best community for it? If it's not attractive, people are not going to come into your building or your hotel, no matter how nice the room is, right? So there's so many moving pieces, and just from an investment perspective, we have to be mindful of the owner of the building, the investor who is giving us, the keys to operate or manage their hotel. It's an investment at the end of the day. So we got to generate a very appropriate return that will help it get financed, that will dictate what the value is, so on and so forth. So I don't know. The reason why I got into it, it's because one, I loved hospitality, but I wanted something a little bit more scientific, something a little bit more tangential. And I thought real estate is it. The reality, and you probably heard the story before. I discovered real estate because of an amazing professor at Cornell, and ever since then, I've loved it. So if I could explain with words what I feel towards it, we'd be talking forever. But it
I
is
appreciate, yeah.
a great manifestation of placemaking. That's what it is.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting to watch some of these new developments, whether it's Saudi developments or in other parts of the world. I'm in San Francisco. You recently moved to Paris. I'm curious, since moving to France, Paris and France in general kind of is really interesting to me because you have all this history. And have you observed anything about placemaking or about kind of development or redevelopment within this context? Because I think a lot of our listeners are going to be in cities where you don't have all this real estate for brand new development. Have you seen anything in Paris that has stood out to you recently as they've done a really good job with placemaking?
Yeah, no, listen, I think what stands out mostly for me in Paris is every time I look up and I look at a gorgeous building that is centuries old, I always say to myself, my God, they're never going to build it like this again. And so that's where, that sense of respect and knowing the history, and me just thinking, my God, what this building saw or what happened here, that I think is actually quite magical. And so I would say it's just it's the history of it and the fact that it's a very modern city with a beautiful legacy. But you take the other extreme, like what we were talking about, Saudi Arabia, where we're starting from scratch, right? So how do you make a very interesting, how do you develop an interesting place where people want to work, live, play at the same time? Because that's what we're all focused on right now. The concept of that 15-minute city as well, that is interesting. Sustainability. So there's
Can you tell us
pros
a
and
little
cons.
bit more about the 15-minute city concept for those who haven't heard it?
It's quite interesting. Basically, it's just saying it's giving you the livability factor, right? You need everything basically to be within 15 minutes of where you live, right? And what it does, I think, is actually quite interesting. It makes a very big place just feel smaller, feel like a village, right? And it allows you to build that sense of community as well. So, there's way more to that. But again, it all goes back to the same thing of placemaking. You want to go to a neighborhood because you want to go explore it, you want to live it, you want to taste it, you want to know what happened there, you want to be a part of it. So again, there's pros and cons of an amazing, gorgeous, incredible city that is Paris with all its history. And by the way, all the efforts that it's doing to make it more livable, to make it more sustainable, etc. And then starting from scratch. And so San Francisco, I think that is the San Francisco itself presents now one of our biggest and best challenges to date. how do we make how do we take such an important city, historical city, how do we make it sustainable for the next 100 years plus, right? How do we make it livable? How do we make it safe? How do we continue to enhance its beauty? It's got its history. How do we combine that with its future history as well? There's so much to do. And just from a real estate perspective, it's a very valuable market. There's a lot of wealth in that market that needs to be preserved, and obviously it needs to be grown as well. So all of these factors are very important. And for a city to work, or for a place to work, there needs to be a very good balance between the public and the private sector. They need to collaborate both sides. I think that maybe that's where a little bit of the disconnect is right now with many of the world cities.
I'm very excited to see the role of hospitality and what that can provide. In preparing for this interview, I spoke with some people that know you and your work, and what stood out was this notion of being a global citizen. They said that you embody this, you talk about it. I'm curious to you, from what we've talked about, placemaking, that local community is very important to you, but you also think on a global level. So, what is being a global citizen in your view?
Um, my gosh, listen, I think it's just this relentless quest to learn and grow. That's it. And to do it by meeting people, right? So the beauty of travel is that we said at the beginning, the first 8 weeks that I've been here at Accor, I've been learning, I've been listening, I've been watching. I'm getting the context so that I can understand why the organization behaves the way it does, right? When you travel to a new country or a new city or a new neighborhood, you have to do the same thing, right? You have to have that cultural context. And what I think is so great about it is that we get to understand each other. So I've grown up in many different places. My family is also from everywhere. Um, by the way, at all levels, it's actually quite nice. And where you surround yourself with people who are very different from you, the first thing that you try to do is you establish what you have in common. That's the basis of a relationship. So, when you're only with people who think and look like you, the first thing you think about is what differentiates you, why you're different. That's almost like I don't know. In Spanish, we say rechazo. It's like what drives you apart. When you're traveling, when you're meeting people from all corners of Earth, many different backgrounds, again, you have that ability to establish a connection very quickly. So I love that. I like to be put in many different settings and backgrounds and navigating it. I completely geek out about it. I like to learn about their food, family, what drives them, their history. Again, getting the context. It's a little bit, maybe you know what, maybe it's a little bit childish. But it's like when when somebody's reading you a story when you're a kid and you're thinking about it, you're learning it, you're absorbing it. That's the pleasure that I get by traveling. It's great. And you know what? You go to any city for the most part, in terms of where I have to travel for work and for fun, I always have somebody I can call. And that is great.
So, in hearing you talk across multiple domains from real estate to global strategy to being a CEO to taking time to invest in relationships, I don't know how you do it all. I feel like you have this insane work ethic. How do you think about time management now? Because I feel like you cover so much on a global basis. How are you currently thinking about that?
Um, that is the number one requirement of what I'm doing right now. It's, about filtering through the noise and all of this information. And by the way, it's not unique to me. It's shared, across the world, and focusing on what's important. And to me, honestly, my most important aspect in life is my family. That's it.
Hmm.
Number one priority. Then the rest of it, I think my brother gave me, we were talking about work life balance. This was years ago, and he said, Gil, he calls me Gil. Gil, there's no work life balance. Forget about that. It's just one blend. Some days, some weeks, you're going to work so much. The other ones, maybe you're going to have a little bit more personal time, non work time, but it's just a blend. And I've been super fortunate that I get to do what I love. So for me, it will sound negative. It's like I'm playing all day, right? I'm discovering, I'm learning. Of course, there's challenges. There will always be quote corporate emergencies that one has to deal with, fires to put out, etc. But that's part of the fun, right? That's part of the learning. That's part of the doing. And when I had built, I had been part of an amazing legacy at JLL. And so when I left JLL, I felt like I contributed what I could have contributed. I gave it my 1000%. I gave it my all, and I left in peace, feeling very happy and leaving my friends behind. But they're friends outside of work, so this was great. And when I joined Accor, I wanted to be part of this legacy. I want to be part of I want to be part of the team that's writing the next chapter, that is thinking about, what the future of hospitality should be like. I love people. I love speaking to everybody. I like learning from them. And so, in terms of time management, it's not an issue. I love what I do. So it's fun. I wish I had 9 more lives, and I wish I had, 50 extra hours in the day.
Well, you're doing a lot with what you have, and maybe staying on this theme of family a little bit. You talk about that being your number one priority. You've spoken before about how becoming a parent has been your proudest achievement among all the things
Yes.
that you've done in your life. I'm curious, how has becoming a parent changed the way that you look at the world?
Oh, it went from this to this. It was before it was, maybe selfish is not the right word, but it was very me. How am I performing? Yeah, it's all about you. When you're a parent, it's all about somebody else. So in this case, it's all about my daughter. She's my muse, and she drives me. She inspires me. I want to be my best version. And even when we all have ups and downs, and maybe times when you're like, yeah, I'm not sure how I feel about this, or am I gonna perform to the best of my abilities, or this is something very new. Before, it was more that inner coach is like, yes, you can do it, you prepared, etc. Now it's more, you got to do it for her. You got to make her proud. So I always think about this. I want her to be proud of her mother. So that's my drive. I guess that goes back to me. So maybe that was a bit of a selfish answer, but from a sustainability perspective, by the way, it does make sense. It does make a lot of sense. It changes the perspective. It's not about me wanting to live a very nice life. I had an amazing childhood. I'm having an amazing adulthood. but it's more about the next gen. So I want to make sure that when Gildita grows up, my daughter's name is Gilda, when she grows up, she has the same opportunities that I had. She gets to live in the same, if not better, environment than I did. And the same, by the way, for my nieces, nephews, and the rest of the children in the world. It's not fair. And one of the things that I think we do wrong sometimes as corporations or leaders, we're talking about the future and next gen and what we need to do down the road, 2030, 2050, etc. It's too late if we think about what we need to do then, by the way. And you're placing all the responsibility and burden on the next generation. Next gen is this gen. 2050 is now, 2030 is now. So when you're a parent, I think you feel that burden much more on your shoulders, as opposed to saying, you know what, it's for the next person to figure out.
I appreciate you sharing that. And I'm trying to think how to phrase this as a follow-up question, because the number one theme of questions that I got from the Hospitality Daily community was, how can female leaders build their career in hospitality? I'm hearing what you're saying and not saying it's just the next generation, it's now. So I guess maybe for female leaders who are looking to build their careers and maybe are a little newer on that journey, but again, to your point, here and now, what would be your advice for building their career if they want in leadership and hospitality?
Listen, this is a very welcoming industry. There's so many women. It's an industry of care, right? The art of hospitality is the art of welcoming, and I think a lot of time we think about just service, and it's not. It's welcoming. When you welcome somebody at home, to your home or to the hotel, that is what hospitality is. I think, for women, this is an amazing organization. It's about people. It's caring. There's an art and a science. But by the way, just with, just any job, it's very hard when you're a mom. It's very hard when you're a woman. So you got to make sure that whatever field you go into it eyes wide open. And I know women work exceptionally hard, but it is not easy to balance. Going back to this work-life balance, this blend, it's a lot of responsibility in your shoulders. I think for me, my aha moment happened when I became a mom. I was 39, and I got to experience the greatest power that we have as women, which is the ability to bring a life to this world. And I had never realized how strong I was. Physically, emotionally, mentally, it is so much work. And so, every time we talked about even maternity leave at work, and sadly, it's the way categorized. Even my insurance is your handicap. It's a disability for insurance purposes, right? But in reality, this is the biggest superpower we have as women. It's the biggest superpower. It's not a disability, it's not a handicap, it's the biggest superpower. And it gives you a different perspective. That's why we can be great leaders. We can feel for others. Okay. We're very good at adapting. You're good at bringing teams together, at bringing differences of opinion. By the way, the world is complicated right now. There's a lot of information, negative news, noise, so on and so forth. And so you need somebody to sort through that, get people to work together. You need to inspire others. That's your job. As a leader, you're the orchestra director, and you got to make sure that everything sounds in harmony. I feel like women were very good at doing that. And, I like to say this. I learned a very important lesson from a student at the Hotel School The Hague. This was, yeah, about 2 months ago, maybe 3 months ago. And he said to me, the leader of the future needs to have three things. It's IQ, okay, EQ, and AQ. And AQ being adaptability. You have to be able to adapt. You have to, be able to work and live in a world that's constantly changing. And I feel like us women, we can do that very well. It's in our DNA. It's embedded in our instincts. And so for anybody wanting to be a leader out there, you got this. It's in you. The problem is a lot of us don't discover it until we become mom and moms, and we feel it. So there you go. That's my mom's speech.
I appreciate you sharing that and talking a little bit about adaptability. It's something that we can all take into our workplaces. As a leader, you also have the ability to influence the organization to some extent, right? And you have been a leading voice for diversity, equity, and inclusion. I think something I've appreciated about how you've both led the companies you've led and been a voice for change is you've talked about some structural things that potentially others aren't talking about that get in the way of operating this way. And even things like business development is specific as how we grow our business. Is it
Mhm.
always all about late meals and entertainment? Are there other things that you think that are these structural barriers that need to be addressed that people aren't talking about that would get in the way of becoming a more inclusive environment?
Yeah, I like to say, listen, if the rules don't exist, just write them. We need to come up with our own rules. So not everything is about late night drinks or a game of golf or whatever, right? You're gonna do business with people you like. You're gonna like and trust people if you develop a relationship. So it's all about relationship building. We can't be, there's no certain way to develop a relationship. It's not like there's only three ways and that's it. So um, we just got to take the time to meet with other people, in whatever. By the way, if maybe you're into this particular hobby or whatever, you can take people into that. But the reality, honestly, the best way to effectuate change is to have representation in the boardroom. And, I've said this many times. I did not appreciate how difficult it is to be a parent until I became one. So for me to go to a boardroom and say we need to do XYZ for a parent just because I'm a woman, I wasn't a parent. I didn't know. Right. And the same for somebody who may have a disability or is a caregiver with very specific circumstances, etc. We need representation in the boardroom. We need to hear that. So, diversity. It's not about gender or just or the color of your skin. It's not about that. It's diversity and background. That's it. And we need to understand what drives you, what your circumstances are, etc., and bring that to the boardroom, and then we can effectuate that change that we need to make sure that everybody feels like they're part of the organization, that they matter, their voices are heard. But we need to make sure their voices are actually heard and not me saying what I think they want to hear. It's not true. It doesn't work like that.
I appreciate you sharing that. And before we go, I'm curious, you have this global perspective on hospitality. What are you seeing or hearing or most excited about in the world of hospitality right now?
Ah, oh, so many things. One is obviously the role of technology and what we can do there, in a very positive way. Obviously, there's very negative implications that people are worried about in terms of AI, etc. But I do think that we can do a lot of really great things. We need to embrace that. Um, we didn't talk about wellness, well-being, etc., but I think that's a very important new dimension that is starting to become a little bit more present in hospitality above and beyond just a spa, right? I was having a conversation with a friend of mine who was talking to me about well-being from let's say from a performance perspective or an optimization perspective as a human, right? Making sure that everything is aligned, mind, body, soul. um, so there's many different dimensions of it. From a placemaking perspective, what you and I discussed, the applications of hospitality above and beyond the hotel. So that is very interesting, especially the idea of placemaking, community making. That is incredibly important. And you know we're in a very interesting time right now. The world order keeps on changing by the day. New destinations are emerging. Old destinations, older destinations are trying to, are thinking about how do we become relevant. We're talking about sustainability. So honestly, the world is our oyster. There's so much to do. There's a role for everybody. And this is by far the most beautiful industry. in the world. So it'd be great to see more and more people want to get into it.
Well, what a great note to end on. Hilda, thank you so much for taking some time to share your thoughts and perspectives with us.
Thank you. I appreciate it.